It shows it's being live streamed.
Shashank, if you are speaking, you are on mute.
I have done the live streaming up, so I will pause a bit.
Oh, 1 second.
We will do a pausing. Wait, the live streaming can be paused, and we can also record.
Yeah, recording is paused now.
Yeah, recording will pause. Okay, we are all set. I'm passing on the host rights to you. Do you want me to pass it on, or shall I keep it until the session? Venkatesh?
I guess you can pass it on to Venkatesh.
He's not there. Whom I should pass it on?
No, I think Shilahu, if you have the host and that is going to help, I think you can have that as the host.
Yeah, it will be helpful because I can.
It will be helpful just in case.
I can manage from behind the scenes.
Yes.
It's very easy to do that. Okay, I think we are all set. Streaming is up. I hope remaining no challenges.
Okay, I'll give that, sir. Thanks for the warning, sir. Let me just can I check the
display? Yeah, we have checked the deck.
No, fact, let him upload
sharing.
From his computer.
In fact, you can actually have it displayed. The cover slide itself, you can have it displayed, not a challenge. So we don't have to show each other's deck. We can use your cover deck while we start with the introductions. Perfect.
Yeah, is it visible?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, great. So, sir, I'll now get back as a panelist. I'll move from this panel, sir. I mean, this list of speakers. So, Venkatesh, you just make me a panelist now.
You are already a panelist, sir. So you want me to make you a regular?
Regular, yeah.
Regular, yeah.
Yeah.
Shilohu is also dropped, is it? We want Venkatesh, do you have the link for the live stream? If we do, can we put it on the chat?
Only Shilohu will have.
Okay.
So
Shilohu,
those on the Zoom call may not need that, because if we do, then they might drop out and join that. So it is better that we give it only to the intended people.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So Anindya, I think that answers your question.
Shilohu has dropped. The control has gone back to the technical team.
So we are doing good on time. It's 9:43 and we still have people coming in. We have a good turnout. We will start sharp at 10. For those of us who are joining right now, namaskar and welcome to this masterclass session. To settle down, we shall be starting shortly. In case there's a question or anything that you'd like to clarify, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A tab. Thank you. Shiloh is joining back.
Hi, just make me, I am Bangalore host. Can you make me host for a temporary? I just dropped off because of some net issues.
Sure, Sheila. I will talk to the technical team.
So Professor Prakash has raised a hand. I request you to put your query on the chat or in the Q&A. Thank you. I guess the moment Abhishek sir joins, we'll have to make him the panelist. So Venkatesh and Shuluku, please do check. I'm not able to check the participants because I'm sharing my screen.
Sir has responded. He received the
Oh,
link.
great, great. Chandrasekhar sir has dropped, I think.
Yes, he has dropped.
I think he'll join back. Jatin Kishore, you've raised your hand. Hi, good morning. If there's any query or question, please feel free to put it on the chat or in the Q&A section. Thank you. We will be starting shortly. We are doing pretty good on time. Namaskar and good morning, everyone, and welcome to the masterclass series of Being Future Ready. We will be starting sharp at 10. Settle down and thank you for coming. So this is not, it's not a lecture. This is not an average Zoom call. This is in the format of a webinar. So you will not be able to mute or unmute yourself or show your video. I mean, turn on or off your video. This will be in the format of a webinar. We invite your questions through the Q&A tab and the chat tab. Yes, we will share a PPT after the session is over.
RC sir has joined back.
Yes.
Now we need to check with Abhishek sir and
Abhishek sir.
how about Prakash sir is joining back?
I did ask him, he said to continue, but if I'll just check with him again.
No, Prakash sir has told that he would be a regular attendee.
Yeah.
So he is very much there, but as an attendee.
There. So Abhishek sir is only awaited right now. I think the rest of us are ready to roll. Namaskar, good morning. welcome to those of us who are just joining. Thank you for joining before time. We will be starting shortly in a couple of minutes now. Please settle down, and in case there's any question or anything that you'd like to clarify, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A option. This won't be a lecture format. This masterclass will be in a format of a webinar. Hence, we don't have the mute unmute option. Thank you. Shilohu, we've got 5 minutes and we're awaiting Abhishek ji, and then we can
Yes,
start.
sir is joining.
Oh, great. So RC sir, the moment Abhishek sir joins, would you like that we start?
I think you should start at 10.
10. Okay.
That would be the right thing to do, whatever be the situation.
Sure.
You count at 10, and I think you should start at 10.
Noted, sir. Okay.
Abhishek Singh has joined, and I have promoted Abhishek ji as the panelist.
Fantastic. Good morning, sir.
Good
Welcome.
morning,
sir.
Good morning, Purvi. Good morning, Venkatesh.
Hello, Vishek.
Morning, sir.
Morning. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you, sir?
All good.
Good to see you, sir. And thank you for doing this, sir. It's going to be really useful. Shilu, have you sent me the background also? Everybody is in the background.
Sir, I'll be sending it to you, sir. Just 2 minutes.
So we got almost 600 plus registrations, I believe.
That's correct, sir.
More than 600.
In
It's
fact,
really
yesterday evening, I shared on various service groups also.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully, at least 20% or 25% of them should join.
Great.
Much more
So,
has joined, sir. We have 300 plus
Yes.
participants.
It's already joined. That's
yes,
very, very good.
Purvi,
we
can
can
you
start.
send WhatsApp server background? I think I'm not able to search in this system.
Sure.
Please, quickly.
But last time, Shilu, you had done the background from the back end only, na?
This account is IAM, sir. Is the IAM account.
Okay. When do we start? It's already 10. Or we
Yeah.
can.
I'll,
As and
Venkatesh,
when
can
I
you
get, I will
send
put
it?
it. Yeah.
Can
We
you?
can
I will
start.
send it
Don't
to
delay.
Shilahu.
Okay. Yeah, you can put it in the chat. Thank you. All right. Namaskar and good morning to everybody. Wishing everyone a happy new year and welcome to the masterclass series of Being Future Ready from IIM Bangalore, CSITM team, Bharat, Karmayogi Bharat and Wadhwani Foundation. We welcome you to this particular session on new and emerging technologies in government. So before we start, we'll quickly, go through a quick list of, items as a part of hygiene. This is a masterclass. It will be in the format of a webinar. We'll quickly introduce all our partners here. We are talking about IIM Bangalore, Karmayogi Bharat, as well as Wadhwani Institute of Technology and Policy. We are also going to be talking about how attending these masterclass can help us earn a certificate. And of course, we will be introducing our speaker for this session today. My name is Purvi Mitra. I am Director for Learning and Content Design at Wadhwani Institute of Technology and Policy. And I'm very excited to host this. Before we move ahead and tell you more, I'd like to welcome our partners from IIM Bangalore, Center for Software and Information Technology Management Team, CSITM, to introduce IIM Bangalore. Over to you, Venkatesh.
Thank you, Purabi. I'm Venkatesh Balakrishnan, Manager for the Center for Software and IT Management. Good morning to all of you and a warm welcome to the speaker of today, Mr. Chandrashekhar, the entire of the organizing members and all the participants. And for the benefit of those of you who are joining this series for the first time, I would give a 1-minute introduction of the center. CSITM has been in existence from 1998 in IIM Bangalore. This is a center of excellence on digital technology management. And over the period of its decades of existence, it has developed a global network of resources. And it supports research and training activities, that is the mandate. And the topics we deal with are artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and other emerging technologies. And all that we do would be at the intersection of technology and management. We conduct various events. We conduct webinars such as this, and we also conduct many workshops for the benefit of those graduating from here. One such event that we conducted recently was a pedagogy practicum, and that enabled all the young faculty to design their own courses. So this is one example, and we conduct various webinar series to enable the researchers and the students to successfully publish their articles. And we also conduct some larger events, such as the Software Product Management Summit. One such event is being scheduled for March of this year. And this will be a 2-day on-campus workshop, because software product management is a very important topic now. And the chairperson of our center, Professor Banerjee, also teaches software product management. And we look forward to seeing you all in the remainder of the series of masterclass, as well as in many other events. And with that said, welcome you all once again, and I hand it back to Purabi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Venkatesh. We'd like to now move ahead with introducing Karmayogi, and we are excited to have the President and CEO for NEGD, as well as CEO for Karmayogi, Shri Abhishek Singh Ji. Sir, over to you to take the floor to introduce Karmayogi. Bharat.
Thank you, Purabi. And first and foremost, I would like to extend my thanks to Wadhwani Institute of Technology Policy and IIM Bangalore for organizing this masterclass, which is also being made a part of the Karmayogi Talks series that Karmayogi Bharat launched on the 2nd of January this year. Karmayogi Bharat, as some of you might be familiar with, is a not-for-profit Section 8 company that Department of Personnel and Training, the Government of India has incorporated, and the major objective of it is to lead the implementation of the Mission Karmayogi program. Mission Karmayogi is the national program for capacity building for civil servants. And as our Prime Minister had mentioned at the launch of the program, that the intent is to move from a rule-based governance system to a role-based governance system. What it primarily means is that we need to set up a system in which every position in the government, at the central government, at the state government, the entire, all departments, all local bodies, local self-governments, at every level, whichever government servant is functioning. So whatever competencies and whatever skill sets are required for him to perform his role, those competencies will be made available to him or her through e-content, which will be hosted on the tech platform that Karmayogi Bharat is building. So we have an iGotKarmayogi.gov.in, which is our LMS platform on which more than 300 courses are right now available. We have almost 300,000 users registered on that, and it has world-class courses. And the courses, where do they come from? They come not only from the government and departments and entities and training institutions, but also from entities like the Wadhwani Institute of Technology Policy, which has helped us in building the module for emerging technologies. We also have courses from World Bank, we have courses from industry, we have courses from professional bodies, and over a period of time, it will evolve into a learning marketplace, into an LMS marketplace, wherein best quality content from anywhere would be made available, and those who are using that can access those courses to build in competencies. Karmayogi Bharat also intends to build up a competency passbook for every government employee, and based on his skill sets and based on the profile and based on the competencies he has acquired, he or she will be eligible for getting his placements done. It will be linked to the career module, it will link to the HRMS module, and it will ultimately ensure quality of governance that we get, and we get the right people for the right job. These courses are available on anywhere, anytime basis. It's self-paced, and it's like and it also has several hubs with regard to like a discussion hub, wherein those who are doing courses for a particular subject can coordinate, can speak to each other, can discuss various aspects, can share best practices. It also has a networking hub wherein it allows people to network with seniors, it allows people to network across departments, and it also democratizes learning. Like any course which is available for senior officials are also available for anyone down the line, and ultimately it will lead to building in like even a fast track way of progression in career, and trying to work out a mechanism in which the best people will be provided the best of the opportunities. The platform is available on iGotKarmayogi.in, and it's also available on the Android app. The iOS app will be launched in a few weeks from now, and what we are seeing is that even the new joinees, as part of the Rojgar Mela, government is giving appointment letters to almost 75,000 people every month. And for them, we launched a Karmayogi Praram module, which includes courses, the basic courses on code of conduct, basic courses on team building, leadership, motivation, stress management, and even courses like how to use Microsoft Word, Excel PowerPoint. So this is proving to be very useful for orienting those who are joining government for the first time. And we also have courses at various levels of the government. I will not go into great detail. In fact, in the first Karmayogi Talks, which we organized on the 2nd of January, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, member of Capacity Building Commission, gave a detailed overview on the Karmayogi Bharat and IGOT platform. So those who are interested can go to the YouTube and our YouTube channel and look at that talk. It's very engaging. I am also thankful for to R. Chandrashekhar sir, who has been the leader in implementation of technology projects in India, right from the early days of National E-Governance Plan, which program which evolved into the Digital India program. So we cannot have anyone better than him to dwell on how emerging technologies can be used in governance. Very often we see a lot of applications of AI. So in what ways we can use AI for addressing issues in agriculture, in healthcare, and the most recent example of ChatGPT and how we are using it for integrating with language models and how we can ensure that access to public services becomes easier, better to citizens, and at the same time, emerging technology be used to make government more efficient and accessible. So with this, I hand it over to you for the next part of the program.
Thank you, Abhishek Singh, sir. It was very insightful to know so much about the leaps and bounds that Karmayogi is already taking in its initial stages. We are excited to know more about the platform and get on the platform to see the myriad of course offerings and learning offerings. Thank you so much for that quick introduction. We would like to now move on to quickly introduce Wadhwani Institute of Technology and Policy. We are a first of a kind institution, and we also want to start by saying that we do skill building for mid and senior level government officers on a pro bono basis in partnership with central and state training institutes. And since last year since 2021, we have crossed training over 2,000 people. And we have actually, created plans where we want to surpass these numbers as well. We work very closely with Capacity Building Commission and Mission Karmayogi. So we are equally excited to host this masterclass where we can all come together and offer the best, experiences through the experts that we bring in these masterclasses. As you can see, WITP for short works in 3 focus areas. One is through Skilling Academy, second is being a technology enabler, and the third is program and policy advocacy. We would like to now, without wasting too much time, take the opportunity to introduce our guest for this masterclass. And before we also do that, there is also something for all of us to look forward for. This is just a mention that of the series that we will be hosting every month. We will have a guest speaker, just like we have Chandrashekhar sir today. And upon attending 50%, at least minimum of 50% of our masterclasses, our viewers will be awarded a certificate from IIM Bangalore, Karmayogi Bharat, and Wadhwani Foundation. So look out for more sessions in the future so that we are able to earn this certificate. So we are extremely excited, like I mentioned, to welcome our speaker for the topic on new and emerging technologies in government, Shri R Chandrashekhar. A quick introduction before I give him the stage. He is currently the chairman of the Center for the Digital Future. He has been a former president for NASSCOM, secretary to the Government of India and Government of India for Electronics and IT. He has also been the former chairman of the Telecom Commission of India and Secretary Telecom. Mr. Chandrashekhar is a decorated officer who is also a recipient of the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration. Also, Mr. Chandrashekhar is associated with several organizations and in advisory roles in board positions. He is also had a distinguished career in the Department of Information Technology, where he has initiated the National E-Governance Program. He has first initiated the 3 pillars of e-governance, namely Common Service Center Program, the State Data Center Program, and the State Wide Area Network Program of India. Mr. Chandrasekhar obviously comes with the experience and a unique breadth of expertise, both in the government and private sector, that covers the entire gamut of the IT and telecom sectors. He has been a member of the country's premier Indian Administrative Services since 1975, and he is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Bombay. We are very excited to have you, sir. I request you to now take the floor and commence the masterclass session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. I'll just share my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Is it visible?
Not yet, sir. Yes, now it's visible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Puravi. And good morning to all of you. I'm going to talk to you today about disruptive technologies and their role in governance. And my talk will be in 2 parts. In part 1, I'm going to talk about why are we talking about new and emerging technologies. It's not as if the use of technology in government is something new. It's been going on for more than 3 decades. So the first part would be devoted to why we are talking about new and emerging technologies today. And the second part is on the how. How do you go about actually using them in practice for practitioners, whether you are a government employee or a consulting organization or, from a user perspective, how does it look? So it's really about the mechanics of implementation within the government. So after the first section, I will stop and then may take some questions and answers before moving on to the how. So that's the structure of this whole discussion. So on new and emerging technologies, the questions regarding the why are they so important? What are some of the opportunities and examples of use of new and emerging technologies? And what are some of the issues and concerns? So the first question is, what are these new technologies? What do we mean by new and emerging technologies? There's a whole slew of them, starting with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. And some things which everybody is familiar with, like the mobile and social media, and things which are now beginning to gain traction, like natural language processing and robots and drones and so on. And there are some which are, already visible or around the corner, like quantum computing, which have not yet made their presence felt, but which could be revolutionary as well. So there are a whole lot of these technologies which today are causing a terrific amount of disruption across different areas. And this disruption is affecting every single sector in the economy. Whether you take something like retail and consumer and logistics, or you take things like healthcare and agriculture and professional services and so on. So from agriculture to aircraft, from the oldest human practice to the most recent ones, they are all being disrupted because of these new technologies. And some of the trends, the global trends that are really visible now, are that it's not just only the use of these technologies, but the dominance of platforms which are powered by big data and analytics, IoT, and artificial intelligence, and so on. And what we are seeing today is the convergence of technology and the domain, and the value lies at the junction of technology and domain, and consulting and innovation actually brings out this whole value. And today, if you look at the technology sector, for which India is well known, it is actually expected to deliver not technology solutions, but business value. And AI and ML, which are sweeping across sectors, creates huge opportunities, but it also poses some challenges. And we'll talk about both a little bit. And one of the exciting areas, particularly for a country like India, which is hugely multilingual, is the natural language processing, both text as well as increasingly speech-to-speech, and its integration into different applications. As an example, now a lot of natural language processing in the form of chatbots and so on are actually coming up in government departments and assisting people in using websites, checking application status, and so on. And there are some departments which are beginning to use them. And some have also aiming to graduate to the next generation where they learn, where these chatbots learn as they interact. And of course, its use for translating documents is also quite common now. Now, there is something special or unique about these new technologies, which bears mention. And that's also the reason why we are talking about them. The first is they're exceptionally powerful. They're infinitely scalable. They can be scaled up to cover every person on the planet. And it can offer personalization at scale. In the past, you could either have personalization, like your own personal tailor, or you could have scale, like Henry Ford's automotive company. But today, you can have personalization at scale thanks to these technologies. And then most of them are highly affordable, at least at an individual level. They're easy to use and quick to implement. So all of these unique characteristics actually make them particularly important from an India perspective. This has actually resulted in a very fortuitous confluence from India's point of view in terms of how these technologies can be applied. I've already talked about the unique characteristics of these technologies, but at the same time, we also have a globally dominant IT industry and a world-class IT workforce in the country. We've seen over the last couple of decades explosive growth of the telecom infrastructure with the mobile revolution, and now with 5G and broadband being rolled out. To add to this, we have also now the second largest entrepreneurial ecosystem, and which is driving innovation in the country, and innovation which is suited and tailored to India's conditions and needs. And finally, public policy is now consistently driving digitalization, whether it's through the Digital India program or a whole lot of other initiatives. As a result of this, any statistics that you look at, the growth and adoption of these technologies in India has been staggering. And some of you would have seen, even when Satya Nadella came very recently this week, he talked about how amazing the spread and scale of adoption in India of these technologies were. These are just some statistics. You can find many, many more statistics, but they all tell the same story. So there is really, what we are seeing is turbocharged growth, and there is much that we can be proud of, although we are still at the early stages of adopting and realizing their full potential. So all of this is not just about technology, but it is changing the whole business environment. It is changing business practices. We've all seen how e-commerce adoption has gone up. We've all seen how social media usage has gone up. We've all seen how services by consumer products, the way they are using all of these platforms to improve the services to customers and so on. And it's not just about businesses. The people themselves are changing, whether it is the older generation or the younger people. Right from the time a child is aware of the surroundings, the use of technology begins. the economy itself is significantly impacted and is functioning in a distinctly different way, increasingly. Even the way politics is practiced has changed, and all of us have seen that. When all this is happening all around, it's obvious that digital governance would be impacted, and naturally there are trends and imperatives which flow out of this. The adoption of technology by the government has been on steroids for some time now. We had the NEGP earlier, and then the eKranti, and now the Digital India program. And there are mega projects which cover hundreds of millions of people, which is a mind-boggling scale for any country. And across the world, a lot of these have been commented upon, whether it's the Aadhaar project or the CoWIN project or GST and UPI. There are huge waves that these have made across the world, not just within India. And increasingly in the social sector, in healthcare, in agriculture and education and so on, we are seeing the beginnings of the same kind of disruption following. States obviously have been also very proactive. In fact, some states, I would say, are even ahead of the central government in terms of the usage of technology. And there are others who are also trying hard to catch up. And we have a situation today where even senior government functionaries respond on social media and are responding to concerns and views that are expressed there. One of the notable features, especially in the context of the platform dominance that has emerged globally, is that India has become seen as a global leader in digital public infrastructure. So these are publicly owned platforms, which are seen as key building blocks, whether it's the UPI or GSTN, or now we are talking about the ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, and so on. In a sense, even the Karmayogi Bharat is such a training platform, which caters to so many different needs. And emerging platforms in areas in the social sector, like I mentioned, and the convergence of technology and domain. But one other thing that these platforms are doing is blurring the difference between government and private sector services. The healthcare platform, for example, brings both government providers and private providers together. And this has enormous implications for the way these are thought about and implemented. And APIs are, in fact, enabling external entities to connect and add value on top of this. So in a sense, it's not just about government, it's also catalyzing and enabling private sector services. Obviously, there are major concerns which are also coming up, because as digital becomes dominant, security threats are mounting in the digital world. We've all seen fake and bad news, the kind of impact it can have, and it travels extremely fast. The response time of public authorities is very, very limited. And also, all of these are happening on multiple channels, on mobile, on internet, on social media, all at the same time. And you can't have a segmented approach where you deal with each one separately. So in what's called the omni-channel approach has to be adopted, and an integrated approach has to be adopted. Especially with the advent of things like AI and computer vision and so on. There are now increasingly also concerns about privacy, about security, and profiling of individuals. One of the other consequences is that data has emerged as a major resource and a contentious issue. And in a lot of countries, there's even a trend towards data localization. And there is this whole concept of data sovereignty that is emerging, that a country owns its own data and therefore has to find ways to protect and preserve that. But it's not that all of these threats are only coming from technology. I think that would be a misunderstanding, because most of the breaches, in fact, are coming from human error or insider involvement. It's not tech alone. And that's important to keep in mind as we go forward with implementation. Here are some examples of how these new technologies are being used, for example, to predict certain issues. Technology has gone past storing information, then analyzing it, And now it has gone on to predict what is likely to happen. For example, who are the students who are likely to drop out in school? Who are the patients of TB who are likely to stop the follow-up treatments? How do you detect likely frauds or the most likely fraudsters in platforms like the GST? How do you identify high-risk cases of pregnancy? All of these are today being done using machine learning approaches here in India. And then I talked about, the computer vision and the kind of applications that are being applied in the government space, using face recognition for attendance, for example, or in healthcare to analyze X-rays and augment the work that radiologists do, or MRI pictures and so on. Similarly, in agriculture, early spotting of pest attacks and so on. And again, for traffic, for those of you who have been unlucky enough to receive a traffic violation challan, you would be happy or unhappy to know that some of this is coming because of computerized monitoring of the traffic. So as we look at all these amazing possibilities, and I've just touched on a very few of them, one must ask the question, what's the primary goal here of using these technologies? Is it to enhance the government's efficiency, the access to data and information, the huge volumes that government has, or its ability to reach the citizens? Or is it enhancing the citizens' ease of availing services or personalizing these services to a citizen the way that a lot of the business platforms today do? Of course, these two are not mutually exclusive, but nonetheless, the primacy that you accord to one or the other does make a big difference. And the NEGP, when it was first launched, actually focused and emphasized the need to improve citizen services. So it's important to keep these perspectives in mind. So with this, let me stop here before I move on to the second part of the how. And pause, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try and respond to them.
Yes, sir. There are some questions. A question from Umesh Rathod is, how can we emphasize that AI will not take away businesses, but the business who we use AI for?
Well, I think what perhaps seems to be the thrust of the question is, how can we ensure that AI does not take away jobs or the work that people are doing? Would that be a correct interpretation of the question? So assuming that that's what was intended, I think what we are seeing is that a lot of the fears that AI would take away jobs, would replace humans, and humans would have nothing much left to do except to strum a violin under a tree, and everything else would be taken care of by AI. These are vastly exaggerated. What is coming up is, for example, the whole approach of human-AI combinations, where AI assists the human being. I mentioned the example, for example, of reading X-rays or reading MRIs. AI undoubtedly helps them. It actually produces its own analysis. But in most cases, even now, the final call is taken by a professional radiologist or an MRI expert. Yes, their productivity goes up manifold with this support. So it is not replacing them, but it is serving as an extension of human capability and the human mind. And I think that's the kind of symbiotic relationship that we need to build. There are also some ethical questions. For example, the use of AI in transportation, autonomous transport, or more recently, this whole debate about AI-powered drones being used in the Russia-Ukraine war, and whether drones should be allowed to make those kind of decisions using AI of choosing a target and so on. So there are all of these concerns as well. But I think in short, we don't need to worry too much about AI completely taking away the jobs. We should be concerned about how do we enhance people's productivity using these technologies.
There is one more question from Umesh Rathod again. Can we share some use cases in public domain on the success of several digital transformation in government apart from digital payments, Samvita Yojana, etc.?
I think today we can say that the examples of transformation in governance are simply too many to list. But I'll just give you some examples of, for example, the pervasive use of Aadhaar to identify people for a whole variety of purposes. It's a horizontal project. And in the past, sometimes we have almost forgotten how difficult it was for people to go and identify themselves. Pensioners had to get all sorts of certificates to prove that they were alive, believe it or not. And similarly, for people to prove their identity to a bank, they had to, gather so many different documents, or to get, their whole landholding details. It was quite a struggle. In some of the social sector, as I was mentioning, we are now seeing increasingly the use of remote healthcare. A lot of this was, in fact, accelerated during the pandemic, during the COVID times. I mentioned the example of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the way the passports are issued. The entire system has been completely transformed. The way income tax, for example, is filed, the way the refunds are given, it's all happening automatically within a couple of days without people, having to run around. So for a lot of the younger generation who have actually grown up in this environment, sometimes it's hard to imagine a world not so long ago in India where people used to sleep at the railway ticket booking counter for 3 days during the holiday rush season just to get a ticket. So I think the examples are very, very numerous, and you will find them all over. Thank you.
And one more question. What steps can help increase citizens' trust in government's technology-enabled initiatives?
Yes, I think that, the trust that citizens have in government's technology initiatives is a critical factor. And I'll think that this trust has to be maintained in 2 ways. One is through technological means itself. And there are some technologies like use of blockchain, for example, which are used to enhance trust. For example, how do you trust that a product is organic, truly organic? How do you build a series of transactions where all the parties to the transaction are absolutely confident that every person involved is actually there and has actually taken those decisions. So these are technology approaches like a distributed ledger, which have brought an amazing level of trust and inviolability of the authenticity of the records. But the other side to building trust is, along with the technology, as I was saying, to actually have a human in the loop. You can have, for example, a chatbot which responds to queries on where is my application or why was it rejected or things like that. And 90% or 95% of the queries would get answered. But there has to also be a mechanism beyond that where you can escalate the matter, and then, if there is something which is not clear or the technology is still not perfect, you can actually appeal to the next level where there's a human being involved. So in that sense, it's a combination of technological approaches involving human, that is officials in the process, and also to relook at the process. How do you eliminate processes which involve physical presence of individuals, which causes huge inconvenience? Imagine a villager having to go to a tehsil office for a small thing, or even to a district office. These are not only inconvenient, they waste a lot of time. There's a huge cost involved, and not everybody can afford these. So I think we have to keep all of these factors in mind as we try to build trust in the system.
The next question, sir, is how government can focus on customer centricity in all their initiatives?
I think that this is arguably the most important purpose of e-governance. At least it has been my guiding philosophy in all the e-governance initiatives, that the purpose of all that we do in e-governance ultimately is the citizen. The efficiency of government is secondary, in my humble opinion. And therefore, when we look at it from a citizen perspective, all you have to do is to look around and look at how the way we get different services, not government services, but private services, how it has changed. How we subscribe to for a mobile phone, how we subscribe to a DTH service, how we subscribe to an online OTT platform, how we get services done for our television or refrigerator or things like that, or even let's say water purifier. Everything is being done through online mechanisms. The private sector has not found that this is not only efficient and leads to customer satisfaction, but it actually reduces costs for the companies. So when all of this is happening at such a frenetic pace in the private sector, why should government function differently? Government also has to build the capability and function similarly. And ultimately, I think we have to keep reminding ourselves that the government here is for the citizens. It exists in order to meet what the citizens need. And these technologies, for all the reasons that I mentioned, are enormously useful in doing that. From the time I joined service in 1975, we were told that, we have to reach out to citizens, we have to actually connect with each citizen. But I think all of these remained largely slogans for much of my career. But it's only today, with these technologies, that it is actually possible to do it in reality. Okay.
So we have
question.
time for one more question for the first part of the session.
All right. So I will ask the next question. How to maintain a balance between privacy issue and use of technology, especially in rural areas where digital literacy is not so encouraging?
Well, I think that's an important question. It has to be answered at many levels. One is, there's the whole basic question of regulation. And as all of you would know, there is currently a digital personal data protection bill, which is doing the rounds and which is in the mode of public consultation on how to protect the individual's privacy. But I think we also need to recognize that a lot of privacy is voluntarily surrendered in exchange for some convenience. For example, when you use e-commerce, you order certain products through the platform, and over a period of time, the platform builds a profile of the individual saying, okay, this guy likes these kind of products. He or she consumes this quantity of products, or, these are the kind of preferences. We know that such data and information is being collected, and therefore a profile of the individual, at least some facets of the individual personality, are getting built up. But it's a deal that is made in exchange for the kind of convenience that is obtained. To some extent, that is also applicable in the case of the government. So I think it's important to understand that this privacy is something which is negotiated at an individual level as far as private services are concerned. As far as the government is concerned, the government it stands on a very different footing, because it has a duty and function and responsibility. And in fact, the identity, a verifiable identity to the individual and the citizen is actually something that the government's quintessential function is. How does it identify a citizen of the country as opposed to somebody who is not? So all of these definitely do involve some trade-offs. And while there is a certain amount of self-regulation by the platforms and certain amount of discipline within the government, there is also the need for the law to lay down certain boundaries and also enforce them. Because when people are illiterate, as was rightly pointed out, they cannot be expected to defend their own rights. And I have never been a votary of the argument that, you just give the choice to individuals and they will protect their own privacy. I mean, giving them the choice and just giving the right of consent is simply not enough, especially in a country like India. And therefore, there has to be a minimum laid down level of privacy, which the law lays down. And I believe that that is the attempt in the new bill that has come up. And it is a little different from the way it is, for example, in GDPR, that is the European version, where much of the emphasis was on consent, and there were serious limitations on the purposes of use of such data. So I think we have to find our own balance. We can't just copy what some other country does. And that balance between privacy and the kind of functionality has to be tailored to our own realities in India. And I think we are on that path as I see it right now. Thank you. So perhaps I can continue with the part 2 of the talk, and maybe if there are some other questions here, we can come back to them later. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me move on to part 2 then, which is how does one go about, implementing when you talk about use of these technologies. The first step, of course, is the conceptualization. And people think, oh my God, conceptualization of using new and emerging technologies. How do I do that? I am not an expert in AI or big data and so on. The fact is, you don't really need to know a whole lot. You need to know as much about new and emerging technologies as you need to know about automotive engineering when you drive a car. It's that simple. So you have to have an awareness, obviously, of these new technologies and their uses. But what's critical is for a person who is in the government or involved in such a project, the domain knowledge of the sector, both inside the government and outside. What are the kind of innovations? What are the kind of business trends that are happening? And what are the kind of disruptions that are taking place? The second is the soft skills, understanding human behavior, the fears that people have. Oh, I'm going to lose my job, or oh, I'm not going to be able to control the outcome, or I'm not going to be able to prevent something from happening. These kind of concerns sometimes retard adoption. And while looking at all these questions, I think what is important is to think from the citizen perspective. How would you, even as a government employee, want this to happen if you are not in the government? So before you call in tech experts or consultants, there must be a clarity on what is the outcome that you want to achieve. Or even if you are not very clear on the outcome, at least what is the problem that you're trying to resolve? For example, in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, one simple problem was just to file quarterly returns. Companies usually took 2 days. People had to queue up before the ROC's office. And sometimes, believe it or not, it took 48 hours to just physically deposit those forms. So that was the problem, one of the problems which MCA 21 was designed to address. Today, it's all instant and online. While looking at and trying to conceptualize the use, it's also important to have a little perspective of how, as a country and as a government, I'm talking here in general, not just the central government or the state governments, but in general, how did we get here? And I'm not going to go into a detailed history. This is not the time or the place, but 2004 onwards, 2004 to 2008 was the first phase when the NEGP, the National E-Governance Plan, was approved, and a lot of infrastructure and mission mode projects, and all of them were conceived. And in fact, the IT industry had grown to a point where PPPs were also possible, public-private partnerships with the private sector. MCA 21 was PPP. Passports was a PPP project. And the mobile revolution was also powered by the private sector in India, and it really blossomed in this period. 2008 to 2014 was when the mobile revolution became very pervasive. And of course, there was some turbulence also in the sector at that time. And the UID project was also cleared by the cabinet at that time. In fact, I remember making all my presentations to the EGOM at that time on the UID project, why it was required, what benefits it would bring, etc. And the IT industry had a really global footprint. And post 2014 to now, we have seen the rise of social media, mobile, analytics, cloud, and smartphones, and citizens becoming digital, the rise of e-commerce and the whole digital government and so on, and a globally dominant IT industry. The result of all this is that today, in most cases, there is in almost every government organization of any significant size and scale, there is some existing level of computerization, and that's the base which exists. Which brings me to step 2, after conceptualization, that what you want to do and which problem you want to solve and what you want to achieve. To review what is already existing. You can't just discard that whole system and say, look, I am going to junk all of this and start all over again. That is fine if there are no significant or useful existing IT systems. Then you have to plan it like a greenfield project, the way MCA 21 was designed, or the way the Passport Seva project, the citizen side of it, was designed, because that didn't exist at that time. And sometimes, one becomes very ambitious. The e-Pragati project in AP, which there was nothing wrong in the approach or the design, but it was so ambitious and didn't take into account the fact that the government as a whole rarely moves in a very organized, disciplined manner. Different parts are moving at a different pace, sometimes in different directions, and so on. Even when COVID modeling was done, so much of information had to be pulled in from so many different places. In many cases, there were not enough systems in place, so different solutions had to be found. But in many cases, there is already a robust IT base. It's just that it is not currently catering to the citizen side of things. So in that case, it makes sense to actually try and build on top of that, use that robust base, because that has come after a lot of effort. So if that is found adequate, then you can actually do the project development riding on the existing system. So it's like a brownfield project. Examples are, the kind of mobile apps which were designed for ASHA workers, or the Nikshay, where the TB, the examples I mentioned about, loss to follow-up of TB, the likely dropouts, etc. Then the GSTN, building fraud detection on top of the existing database, or income tax, similarly, similar types of services. So all of these have actually built on top of whatever was already existing. But while many things have changed and the environment has changed, the surroundings have changed, the technology has changed, there are still some age-old ground rules for e-governance projects which remain valid even today. And it's important to keep that perspective in mind, that when you are implementing these e-governance projects which deliver a government service, only 20% of the success is because of technology. 30% is on how you rejig the processes. I was mentioning that, it's important to look at processes which require people to come to government offices and ask the question, is it really necessary? Is it inevitable? And then 50% of it is managing change. When the Passport Seva project was implemented, there were a lot of apprehensions. All the people who were working in passport offices said, if you implement this project, what will happen to us? We are going to lose our job, or we are not going to get the overtime that we were getting earlier. So all of these kinds of questions are valid questions and need to be answered. The second is that you must capture data at the source. If you don't, then there will always be the kind of gaps that we saw, for example, in the COVID projections. Either it is not comprehensive, or each data record is not complete, or it's not accurate, or it is not current. All kinds of problems with the data which you can imagine. So, but on the other hand, if you look at the vaccination drive, which was done recently, it's a phenomenal example of how data was captured right at the source. And interestingly, not just from government organizations, but even from private entities. So the data was current, the data was accurate, and the data was complete because you required certain amount of data to be put in. And that brought the miracle of how the whole COVID was dealt with in India in comparison to so many other countries, both developed and developing. I've talked about the process and the procedure part. And the next is, to first decide on the project outcomes for the citizens. What's the outcome for the citizens? I think that should come first. And then, of course, for the government also. Obviously, we must look at how does government also functioning improve. So the technology should always come later. Some of the worst examples of approach is where people say, I'm going to computerize everything. It's a meaningless statement. Or somebody says, I'm going to use AI in a big way. Why? So these things are not done for the sake of technology. There has to be a larger purpose that is driving the adoption. And as I said, a lot of technology can be outsourced today. You can implement standard processes. And even if an individual officer is smart and tech savvy, it's important to remember two things. One, the rest of the department may not be as smart and tech savvy as you are. And the second is that you're not going to be there forever. But these systems are being built for a long, long time. They will be there for decades and maybe more. So it's important to build the institutional support for these kind of projects. So why sometimes we need the private sector in this? One, of course, is the obvious question of quantity. You have nearly 4 million people, 4 to 5 million people employed by the private sector, whereas the number in the government across state, center, and all the government agencies is hardly a few thousand. So talent, both in terms of the quantity as well as in some cases of the quality. There are undoubtedly some extremely capable and smart people in the government, but as a general proposition, some of the public sector service providers often lack the latest technology talent or the familiarity with business practices which are being adopted, like this whole omni-channel approach, the kind of innovation, and most importantly, the customer orientation, because that is not the way that traditionally government has been handling it. But yet, in many cases, public sector service providers are often taken because they are the easy way out, not because they are the best suited. The other aspect is it's important to maintain a distinction, even when the private sector is brought in, between the delivery of the service and the decision that is involved in making the service. That decision has to remain a government decision, like in the case of passports or income tax or MCA. But the service delivery, which is actually the pain point for the citizens in terms of access, in terms of speed, in terms of transparency, that can very easily and effectively be outsourced. And it brings increased transparency. But when you use things like AI, then sometimes people want to know why. It's not good enough to say, well, the AI system has said that you are not eligible. It has to be explained. So increasingly, the trend is to rely on explainable AI, where the AI itself explains how it came to that conclusion. Then we get into actual implementation. Let's suppose the conceptualization has been done and the assessment of where things stand is over, and now we are going into implementation. So how do you resource that implementation idea? So first is, as I said, the option one is to get the assistance from a government agency. You can go to the NIC, or you can go to CDAC or NEGD or some state PSU which is there, which can help to conceptualize and implement the project. And the GEM, for example, was done like that. The e-immigration and a lot of the work in the passports and in income tax and so on were done by the NIC in the earlier stages. But some of the disadvantages are that this often leads to incremental conceptualization, because there is no discipline required to completely put down everything that is needed in a systematic way. And as I said, sometimes the implementation agency may not also have all the skills that are required. So, which is why we also have to look at the option number two, which is for the conceptualization stage itself onwards. You can actually use volunteers and honorary advisors to develop the concept. As I said, the initial concept may have got done, but you can use, today there are lots of options of where you can go to get such voluntary or honorary advisors. There are public-minded tech specialists. For example, you have the International Innovation Corps, which provides interns at their cost. not-for-profit organizations such as WITP or group of volunteer people like iSpurt, or there's so many other such agencies. And we've seen a heavy use of these approaches in the case of the Aadhaar project, in the case of the National Health Authority and the Digital Health Blueprint. The advantage which this approach is that there is no procurement process and no funding involved, and you can bring in some really high caliber individuals who are motivated by nothing but public service. But the disadvantages also are that sometimes this can bring in unknown agendas, especially when some of the volunteers belong to a private company. So there are, one has to weigh all these aspects very carefully. And then after you have completed the detailing of the conceptualization to a level where you can actually bid it out, because in this case, when you're using the private sector, everything has to be detailed, because at the end of the day, it has to be reduced to a contract. And that requires the use of consultants, whether bodies like the NISG, which is a not-for-profit, or Big Four, like the big consulting houses, or other similar entities. There are many such agencies which can detail the concept and design the RFP, the request for proposals, which will include the service level agreements, master services agreement, and which can help to manage the bid process and help identify the what is actually needed. So this is how it happened in the case of GSTN. This is how it happened in the case of the CSCs. And it's critical in this case because you are looking for innovation, you're using the private sector, and you never know what is the danger which you are overlooking. So it's important to have a very open bid process, release even the draft RFP for discussion, release the eligibility criteria for a discussion to get wide consultation, because sometimes the eligibility criteria eliminate small companies which have tremendous capabilities. And it's also important to look at PPP options, public-private partnership options, where a turnkey responsibility is given. But it's important to have appropriate risk allocation and not dump all the risks apart from the technology risk. Governmental risks cannot be, the likelihood of employees accepting or resisting, that cannot be jumped onto a private partner. And exploring the possibility of using startups in specific contexts is also something that is certainly worth looking at. So basically, I think we have to look at mirroring some of the private sector best practices in the way government interfaces with citizens. Think about it from a citizen or a business perspective. Omni-channel services I've already talked about. The personalized services, what's called customer relationship management by the private sector, can be very well called the citizen relationship management by the government. And the APIs are very important because they allow innovative value-added services to be built by the private sector around the core government services. And enhancing trust, I think one of the questions also had come up. The two-factor authentication in financial transactions, for example, has brought the use of PIN and so on, has brought a huge level of trust in financial transactions. But it's not as if private sector is a kind of panacea. There are many challenges here. There's a complex techno-commercial procurement process. There's a need for clarity on the end goals and deliverables, and how you use volunteers, which volunteers can be used, can't be used, etc. The contractual rigidity is another big problem because the private sector works on the basis of, very strict financials, profit and losses. And you can't just change the terms without considering, how much additional burden it puts on the private sector. And conversely, the private sector generally doesn't understand very well how the government functions and how things keep changing. So all of these, I think, are some issues and challenges. And a lot of the procurement clauses, they eliminate innovation. You say the company has to be there for at least 3-4 years. It has to have a turnover of, 100 crore. Effectively, you're saying that, startups and innovation are strictly prohibited. So that's, I think, a serious limitation. And sometimes because of all these, people are worried about watchdog agencies, focusing on some mistake somewhere and then putting the officers into trouble. And so they say, why do all this? Maybe I best go to a Sarkari organization. So these are some of the challenges. I'll just give you two quick examples of how the voluntary services were used. For example, this TB, identifying dropouts or predicting dropouts was one thing which was done for the CTD department under the Health Ministry. And this was done by the Wadhwani Institute of Artificial Intelligence for them and developed. And it was good that, the need was there, the agency was there, and it was directly brought into the picture. But here also, there were huge challenges in terms of getting access to the data. Nobody knew, they were not willing to transfer data, rightly so. But then they were not willing to provide access to the data. And resultantly, it was a big problem to work out. Nobody knew what anonymization is or how it can be implemented. And this privacy law also was in the background. So I think to sum up, as we conclude, I think the questions to ponder is, how is governance changing as it goes digital? What do you think it will look like when it becomes fully digital and fully connected? And how can your sector or department that you serve be positioned for that digital future? So I think these are some of the questions which need to be pondered over, and obviously the answers are very context specific. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm open to any questions.
So there are questions, sir. I would read out the first question.
Yeah.
Digitization is very important for the progress of our country, and inclusivity is a must when we think of digitization in a diverse population. How do we intend to do this? Also, what steps are being taken for security and privacy and retention of data?
Yeah. So, I think this question partly repeats what was asked in the first session. As I said, the whole idea of these new and emerging technologies is to facilitate inclusion and facilitate personalization and ensure that things are designed to cater to the citizens' convenience and the citizens' needs rather than the government's ability or the government's needs. So, and that's what is possible with these technologies. I mean, if you take UPI as an example, that is what has enabled financial inclusion to a significant extent. Anybody with a mobile phone is able to transfer money. Immigrant workers, we all saw how, they all came into prominence when they were under distress during the COVID attack. But the way that they were able to communicate with their family, the way they are able to send money home, which is badly needed, the reason in the first place why they become immigrant workers, all this is been possible, this kind of inclusivity, because of these technologies. The privacy part, I think we have already discussed. I don't want to repeat all of that, but clearly it is something which is important, and one has to always strike a balance between convenience and privacy. The part in the question which was unique and different is about the retention of data. And I think this has been a contentious issue even in the recent bill, because there has been a limit kept on the retention of data by private entities, saying that once the purpose for which the data was collected is served, then the data should not be retained. But that limitation is not there as far as the government is concerned. And to some extent, some people have pointed out that this is an asymmetry which needs to be looked at. So retention of data is, I think, a big question. In the earlier draft of the bill, the previous bill, which was junked, in fact, there was even the right to be forgotten, but that was perhaps, I think, a little too idealistic. But the bar on retention of data beyond the need is a far more practical approach.
Okay. The next question is, we talk about emerging technologies, but I have observed that we struggle to provide the required infrastructure and resources to sustain these technologies. What are the measures to ensure that such hindrances are not there?
I sincerely hope that this question was framed before I had completed part 2. because the burden of my part 2 presentation was essentially to say how you get the requisite resources, number one. And I think I have dwelt on that quite extensively. The second is that in a lot of the cases, this infrastructure and managing it, managing a data center, all of this puts a lot of stress within the governmental system. And, signing even maintenance contracts or ensuring that the air conditioning is working continuously. If bills are not paid because of budgetary reasons, they get delayed, etc. So today, almost everything is available on tap, and it is possible to convert all of this capex into an opex by, for example, going to a data center, except for highly sensitive data. If you look at the e-office, for example, highly sensitive files or classified files are not covered. So since this deals only with data which is anyway in the public domain, you can as well use public infrastructure for storing this. So that obviates the need for setting up dedicated infrastructure and all the complexities associated with managing it. Skilled personnel, I have mentioned earlier also how the private sector could be used. But let me make one thing absolutely clear, and I'm glad this question was asked, because you cannot outsource the internal competencies, understanding of what the government wants to do for the citizen, what is the end goal, or what was the thinking behind bringing these technologies in. So some minimum capability has to be built internally, and particularly when the officers at the top are transferable and move around, I think it's important to leave a legacy of basic internal capability, which can continue to deal with all the external agencies involved, because it involves a huge number of different agencies, and there has to be somebody inside the organization who can talk to all of them with some knowledge and some authority. I think that is really the balance which needs to be struck between trying to get some everything from outside and trying to get everything from inside. It has to be a balance between the two.
The next question is related to frauds happening in digital mode. Lots of frauds are happening in digital mode. How can it be restricted through artificial intelligence?
Well, I was mentioning the example of GSTN itself, and even in the other departments, for example, even in the Enforcement Directorate or even in the banking sector, artificial intelligence is increasingly being used to spot frauds or to point to likely frauds or, likely violation of some rules. In the absence of artificial intelligence, this had to be done manually, and obviously it was very sporadic. It was not possible to cover all the data. And the result was that whoever you picked would say that they are being picked, they are being singled out for harsh action. I'll give you one example. When I was in the Commerce Ministry, suddenly one fine year we found that the exports of IT software to Russia had gone up enormously, And on the face of it, this was very strange because, first of all, Russia was not that big in software. And secondly, they were never importing from India. So there was a suspicion in the RBI that this is not a straightforward transaction. Now, these kinds of things, when you look at the totality of banking, totality of governance, will happen. And let's be clear that this is not an exception. They will happen by the thousands or even more, hundreds of thousands. So you need these vast engines to really pore over the data, match them with patterns, identify deviations from the normal patterns, and then say, okay, look, here is a list of possible frauds, not frauds, but possible frauds. And then, somebody with knowledge, experience can actually look at them and say, yes, these are seem to be fraudulent cases, or these are kosher, they're all right, there's no problem. So I think that's the way in which we need to look at using these technologies in a discriminating way.
The next question, sir, is how can we overcome the reluctance of acceptance to the disruptive technologies? Even if government is coming up with initiatives to enhance productivity, we still have acceptance of digitization problem and at lower rungs. So how can we overcome this?
I think, in my view, this is a complete myth that people propagate sometimes. The question, by the way, is one of the most appropriate questions that has been asked. This myth that I was talking about is that somehow the lower levels are resisting it, and the higher levels are pursuing it with a very noble mission, but somehow the lower levels are all resisting it. My experience has been very, very different. And when they resist, you better listen and find out why they are resisting. I'll give you one example. When an app for the ASHA workers was designed, and they were told that, all you have to do is to load this on the mobile phone, and then you report in this manner, and then it will provide you with this support to deliver even higher quality of services. They thought that the ASHA workers would be jumping with joy. Instead, they were quite reluctant to use something which to the providers seemed to be actually solving their problem. And the reason was, they said, I already have 70 apps which have been dumped on me, and I have to fill them up. Now you're giving me the 71st app, which also I have to deal with. So I think one has to look at it from the point of view of the ants-eye view. How does the bottom level worker actually deal with this? Does it make their life easier? Do they have to work less? Who doesn't want to work less if they can, while still doing their job? Everybody would like to have an easier way of doing things. After all, that's what we do in our daily life. Earlier, we used to buy tape recorders and painfully put one tape after the other, or we used to ring up to the radio station and have a user's choice. Then we started getting these CDs, and then we had USB drives which had many more songs. And today I have to just keep speaking to an Alexa, and I can get whichever song in whichever language from anywhere in the world at any time. So all of these, I think, have actually made it easy. The point I'm making is that the more advanced technologies are those which you don't even feel. They are just in the background. You forget that there is very sophisticated technology behind it. So what is important is to make, and therefore sophisticated technology is much easier for ground level staff to use. If you are using, for example, natural language processing, speech to speech, it's not feasible in many cases today because of the levels of accuracy. Google Translate has an accuracy ranging from about 95% for Spanish to 55% for Armenian. For Chinese, it is 82%. For Indian languages, it is Hindi and so on. It's about 72%. Still very short of what is ideally required. So I think the thing is to look at it from the point of view of the lower level worker, to be able to communicate to them. That's why I said change management is 50% of the problem. You have to explain to them why it makes their work easier. And you have to validate it. You have to verify it. You have to get them to confirm it. It is not you telling them that their job has become easier. It is they themselves have to feel that their job is easier. When the Treasury computerization program was done in AP, this was in the 1990s, when all this IT business was at its infancy. The staff who were going home at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night could leave at 5 o'clock. In banks, when it was brought in, staff who used to work till 10 o'clock were free by about 4 o'clock. Of course, this brought a different problem, that where do they get their overtime from? But I'm not going there. So, one has to deal with and handle these questions and take them along. And if you can package it in the right way, sometimes it requires incentives, sometimes it requires explanation, sometimes it requires cajoling. And not to make too fine a point of it, sometimes it requires, after doing all this, to say, okay, this has to be done. So all of these, I think, are things which test the skill of the manager. These are not technology questions. These are change management and administration and administrative skill that is involved in all of these questions.
The next question is related to IT-based solutions versus artificial intelligence-based solutions. The question is, many state government focus on IT solutions rather than AI solutions. What change in the approach may change this mindset? So they may directly look at AI-based applications rather than trying to automate things using IT solutions, given the fact that we are already lagging behind as per industry standard.
Yeah. First of all, I think that the presumption that IT-based solutions are different and AI solutions are different is not entirely correct. An AI solution is also an IT solution, and it rides on IT. And there is usually a base level of IT that is existing on which the AI rests. Even the development of new AI rests on vast amounts of data. Natural language technologies, natural language processing technology capability rests on huge corpora or collections of data, text, voice, recordings, etc., which make it better with the passage of time because it learns from its mistakes. So when we talk about technology, we must be careful not to think about sprinting before we have learned to walk or even crawl. So some degree of usage of IT and familiarity with technology and how it works is an important first step. But as I said, because of all the efforts over the last 3 decades, in most cases, there is something which is already there. And I think it's also important not to just think of jettisoning everything and starting afresh. In most of the cases, this sits nicely as a layer on top of a lot of data which is already there. If you look at GSTN, for example, one way of looking at GSTN today is that there is a IT solution which GSTN has implemented, and the fraud detection or the fraud analysis is done by AI solutions which are sitting on top of that. Same was the case with TB, same was the case with school dropouts. So IT and the AI systems actually have to be harmonized and synchronized and not seen as alternatives to each other.
Sir, time check. It's 11:21. I think we should have time, just enough time for maybe one question.
Yes, I think
okay.
that should be fine. Yeah.
The next question is related to one of the mention that you made, relative incentive. The question is how to train next generation leaders in digital transformation. Is it dependent on incentive structure in the government?
Yes, I think incentives are important. If people are, like is being done in this program, and that what Karmayogi is trying to do, which is to, give people certificates, try and ensure that their assignments are also linked to their training and so on. And the second thing is training, which is also important so that people are properly trained, because, you have 2 extremes of people, one who say that all this technology is rubbish and it's not going to do anything, and the other who say, I'm going to computerize everything. But people have to be far more nuanced than that. But in my own experience, if I can share, most of the time, I found that the best people were those who were excited by the prospect of what they were going to do, by the prospect of what they were going to achieve, by the footprints in the sands of time in governance that they were leaving behind, because that would last long after they had left, the satisfaction that it gives them. So these were extremely strong motivations, and none of the officers who had worked at that time ever once complained about having to stay for long hours in the office, or not being paid overtime for that, or not being given out of turn promotions. So I think we need all of them, but I think communicating the importance of what is being done, communicating the purpose and communicating the value of this to people makes a huge difference. And I would look at that as an important adjunct. Of course, this is not at all to say that incentivization and training on a continuous basis is not important. Lastly, I think it's very important for everyone to be aware of what is happening around us, because it's not just about government and governance. It's also about what's happening in the world. How are different things functioning? I mentioned so many examples of the private sector, how services are being provided, and how even things like Alexa are working, just as an example. So the question to ask is, how are these changes happening, and is there a way in which we can use these in government? How do we integrate them? But remember, government and private sector are, very, very different kettle of fish. In the government, a record is important. Who took the decision is important. How the decision was taken is important. These are not compromisable or negotiable, because its system of public accountability requires that. So those differences cannot be lost sight of. We can't say that, government should function like the private sector, as much as we can't say that the private sector should function like the government and do everything, for free, or try to do everything with only a larger public purpose in mind and not keeping profit in mind. So these work in accordance with very different principles. And I am constantly surprised by how little people in the public sector understand how private sector functions, and vice versa. I have worked on both sides, and to me, it's a continuing mystery how each can be so unaware of the ground rules on the basis of which others function. So I think all of these are things which any vigilant person, any intelligent person should normally be doing, irrespective of whether he wants to be in e-governance or in new technologies. But keeping yourself aware is important, because the world is changing so fast. Every 5 years it is changing. It's hard to imagine that before 2005, there was no social media, there was no Facebook. How much has changed in 3 decades? So unfortunately, we live in a world where the knowledge which we got when we were in college has very, very limited utility. It's the knowledge which we acquire continuously which is important. So I would just say that, be aware and keep observing, and remain a student all your life, no matter what level you reach. That's the only mantra I can suggest. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that was exhilarating. Thank you so much, Mr. Chandrasekhar. I have to start by saying that the insights shared in this session, in the part 1, which is the why part, whether it is the application for government departments or New India's digital economy, to tech adoption by government, as well as digital public infrastructure, to part 2, which is the how part, where you spoke about the step 1 of conceptualization, then reviewing status and implementation. And of course, the questions that we've received, all of these have certainly added a lot of insights, sparked a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, because the number of questions that we have received is beyond the timelines that we have for today's masterclass, sir. We humbly request all our viewers who have sent us the questions, if your question has not been asked, we will share these questions with Chandrasekhar sir, and we will come back to you with answers, time permitting, so that he has enough time to look at the questions and answer them. So sit tight for those. At the end, before we close, I would profusely want to thank Mr. Chandrasekhar to come and literally break the records of the viewership for this masterclass session. We also have over 50 people watching the live stream as we speak. I also want to thank Karmayogi and Abhishek Singh sir, for giving us this opportunity and partnering with us and making this such an excitable and insightful event for all our colleagues in the government as well. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. Not to forget, IIM Bangalore, Venkatesh, your entire team, as well as Professor Shankadeep. And of course, not to forget WITP team for this extended support. Thank you very much for this particular session. We are extremely excited to kick this off, and we look forward for the next sessions to come in each month. Stay tuned. We will be reaching out with more communication. Do not forget to write your questions. We also have the emails present. Feel free to write your questions in case you've not put them on the chat. Thank you very much.
Rabi, if I may just add my own word of thanks
Please,
to
please.
IIM Bangalore and to the WITP and the CSTIM
Certainly,
for
sir.
having given this opportunity to interact and engage. And I particularly want to thank and compliment Abhishek and his team for the tremendous work that they're doing in Karmayogi. And I think the speed that they have brought to the task, a very formidable task, if I may add, has, I think, been truly commendable. So you have a lot of people like that in the government who are doing amazing things. And this is, again, an example of a dominant platform. It will be the dominant platform in training, the speed at which it's going and how it is growing. Impossible to do these things physically. It's all being done digitally. So thanks and congratulations to all of you. And of course, to WITP as well.
Thank you, sir. It was a brilliant session, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Prakashji,
you.
would you
Thank
like
you,
to?
sir. Thank you, sir, very much for your session, which has actually exhilarated all of us. And in fact, we had more than 500 on Zoom, plus more than 50 people on YouTube.
It was, yeah, and the 500 was also because we reached the limit of 500. I started getting messages on my this that that we are not able to log in. So I gave them the YouTube link. So one of the best sessions, sir, we have attended in, and we will put it up on iGot also, so that those who have those who have joined, you may share the link with the of YouTube link and also the iGot link with those who might have missed it for any reason.
And this was the first time this limit was breached in IIM Bangalore. So we would relay this to the director and the upper management. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you. I guess that brings us to the end of this particular masterclass session of Being Future Ready. Stay tuned for our next month's session. We are extremely excited. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today. Have a fantastic day ahead and the week.